This is something that happened to me last summer, and let me tell you, it was straight out of a psychological thriller. My parents were out of town for the weekend, and I had the whole house to myself. Or so I thought. I planned a chill weekend, just me, my games, and maybe a pizza or two. But fate, it seems, had other plans. It was late Saturday night, and I was deep into a gaming marathon. That's when I heard a knock at the front door. Weird, I thought, considering it was past midnight. Who could it be? A delivery I forgot about? Hesitantly, I paused my game and went to check. Peeking through the peephole, I saw a man I didn't recognize. He was looking around nervously, which set off alarm bells in my head. Deciding it was best not to open the door, I asked, "Can I help you?" His response sent chills down my spine. "I know you're alone in there. Open up, it's urgent." His tone was desperate, but something didn't feel right. I shouted through the door, telling him I was calling the police. He started banging on the door, yelling for me to let him in, claiming he was being chased and needed to hide. I was freaking out, unsure if I was dealing with a victim or a potential threat. I dialed 911 and explained the situation. The operator advised me to stay away from the door and assured me that help was on the way. The banging continued, growing more frantic, and then suddenly stopped. Silence. It was almost worse, not knowing where he was or what he was doing. Minutes later, I saw flashing lights outside and heard voices. The police had arrived. I opened the door to them, and they told me the man had vanished, but to stay inside and lock up while they searched the area. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread, wondering if I had made the right call. Was he truly in danger? Or was I the one in danger? It wasn't until the next morning that I got my answer. The police informed me they had caught the man breaking into another house down the street. He was wanted for a series of violent home invasions. The realization that I had narrowly avoided a potentially deadly encounter by trusting my instincts and not opening the door was both a relief and a horror. So this happened to me last year, and it still gives me the creeps whenever I think about it. My family decided to visit my grandparents for the weekend, but I couldn't go because of work. I was kind of relieved, to be honest. A whole weekend to myself? Yes, please. But things didn't go as I'd imagined. It turned out to be the most terrifying weekend of my life. It started on Friday night. I was in my living room, binge-watching some show, when I heard what sounded like footsteps upstairs. I paused the show, thinking maybe my brother came back because he forgot something, but then I remembered he had left his keys with me. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I shrugged it off as the house settling or my imagination. On Saturday, things got weirder. I woke up to find the back door slightly open. I was sure I had locked it the night before. I went around the house, checking every room and closet, half expecting to find someone hiding, but there was no one. I convinced myself I must have forgotten to lock the door and let it go. By Saturday night, I was on edge. Every little sound made me jump. I decided to call it an early night, but just as I was dozing off, I heard it again. Footsteps. This time, they were pacing back and forth above my room. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but then the footsteps stopped. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest, but nothing happened. I didn't sleep much that night. Sunday morning arrived with no further incidents. I was feeling drained and a bit foolish. Maybe I was just letting my imagination get the best of me. That was until I went to take a shower. As I passed the mirror, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were muddy footprints on the bathroom floor. I live alone, and I hadn't gone outside. How the hell did they get there? Panicking, I ran through the house, checking every possible entry point, but everything was locked tight. I called the police this time, and they came to check the house. They didn't find anyone, but one officer pointed out something I hadn't noticed. A small, almost unseeable mark on the back door's lock. Someone had picked it. The police suggested I stay somewhere else for the night, and I didn't need to be told twice. When my family returned, I told them everything. We changed the locks and installed a security system. Nothing strange has happened since, but I still get nervous whenever I'm home alone. I don't know who was in my house or what they wanted, but the thought of someone silently moving around while I was there, possibly watching me, chills me to the bone. This happened a few months ago when my parents went out of town for a wedding, leaving me to hold down the fort. At first I was stoked. Freedom, junk food, and marathon gaming sessions. Little did I know I was in for a night straight out of a horror movie. It was my second night alone, and everything was pretty chill. I was in the middle of a gaming marathon, headphones on, world off. Suddenly my dog, Max, starts growling, low and menacing. Now, Max is the chillest dog you'll ever meet. He rarely barks or growls, so this immediately had me pausing my game and listening. I heard nothing and figured maybe Max heard a cat or something outside. Fast forward to around 2 a.m., I'm getting ready to call it a night when Max starts growling again, but this time, he's staring at the front door. I get that weird, prickly feeling on the back of my neck, like when you just know something's off. I go to the door, thinking maybe I'll see someone outside or something, but nope, nothing. I double-check the locks, because you can never be too safe, right? I head to bed, but I'm feeling weirdly awake now, alert. I'm just about to drift off when I hear it. A soft thud, like something being dropped softly on carpet. It's coming from downstairs. My heart is doing the samba in my chest, but I tell myself it's the house settling or whatever. Houses make noises, right? But then Max starts growling again, and I hear the thud a second time. Nope, no way is that the house. I grab my phone thinking I should call someone, but then what? Tell them I heard a thud? I decide to investigate, which, looking back, feels like a dumb move straight out of those horror movies where you yell at the screen for the character to not do the thing. I tiptoe downstairs, heart pounding so loud I'm sure it's audible. I flick on the lights in the living room. Nothing. Kitchen, nothing. Then, I make it to the dining room, and I freeze. One of the chairs is slightly pulled out, not how I left it. I'm sure of it. I didn't use the dining room at all. I hoped out of there, locking myself in my room, and called my uncle who lives nearby. He came over, checked the house, and found the back door slightly ajar. He hadn't found anyone inside, thankfully. Turns out, I had forgotten to lock the back door after letting Max out earlier. Someone could have easily slipped in and out. Nothing was missing, but the thought that someone might have been inside the house while I was there, moving silently, maybe even watching me, still gives me the creeps. Since then, I triple-check every lock in the house and keep Max close. He's getting extra treats for being the best guard dog. Never thought I'd be the one sharing one of these stories, but here we are. I've always been a skeptic, the seeing is believing type. But what happened to me a few weeks ago has me questioning everything. I live in an old house. It's been in the family for generations, and while it has its quirks, creaky floors, drafty windows, I've never felt uneasy in it, until that night. My parents were away on a trip, and my sister was at a sleepover, leaving me to enjoy a weekend of solitude. It was late, around midnight, when the first odd thing happened. I was in the kitchen, getting a snack, when I heard what sounded like whispering coming from the living room. I figured it was just the TV. Maybe I hadn't turned it off. But when I checked, the TV was off and the room was empty. The whispering stopped as soon as I stepped in, leaving me confused but not scared. I brushed it off as my imagination. I went back to the kitchen, and that's when I noticed the second odd thing. The time on the microwave was blinking as if the power had gone out, but everything else was working fine. I reset the time and headed upstairs, feeling a bit uneasy but telling myself it was nothing. I settled into bed with a book, trying to shake off the uneasiness. That's when the real terror started. The whispering returned, louder this time, and it was coming from all around me. I couldn't make out words, but it sounded like two voices having a conversation. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move, my heart racing. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I was about to convince myself it was all in my head when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Slow, deliberate steps. I thought, this is it. I'm about to become a statistic, a story on the news. I didn't have a lock on my door, thanks old house, so I did the next best thing. I pretended to be asleep, hoping whatever or whoever it was would just go away. The footsteps stopped right outside my door, and I could hear what sounded like someone breathing. I was holding my breath, trying not to make a sound, praying they would just leave. After what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes, the footsteps receded, and I was left in silence once again. I didn't sleep that night. At the first hint of dawn, I packed a bag and left to stay with a friend until my family came back. I didn't tell them what happened. I didn't think they'd believe me. I'm not even sure I believe it. I still live in that house, and nothing like that has happened since. It was a Thursday night. My parents were out of town, and I had the house to myself. Perfect time to catch up on some studying without distractions, or so I thought. It was around 11 p.m., and I was knee-deep in textbooks when the power flickered and went out. Great, I muttered, figuring a fuse blew or a storm had knocked out the power. I grabbed my phone for light and headed to the kitchen for some candles. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of glass breaking from the back of the house. Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a tree branch had fallen. I crept towards the sound, heart pounding when I heard a second noise, the distinct sound of heavy boots on broken glass. Someone was in the house. Panic surged through me. I wasn't alone. I remembered the true crime podcasts and what victims said. Act fast. Think faster. I dialed 911 as quietly as I could, whispering my address and situation. The operator kept me on the line, her voice a lifeline in the dark. Terrifying minutes that followed. I could hear the intruder moving through the house, items being shuffled around. It dawned on me. This wasn't a random break-in. We'd been targeted. Rumors of a dangerous criminal on the loose had been all over the news, someone who didn't just steal but harmed the occupants. Hiding in the closet under the stairs, I prayed they wouldn't find me. The operator's calm voice told me police were on their way, but each second stretched into eternity. Then footsteps approached my hiding spot. My breath caught in my throat. The closet door swung open, and I braced myself for the worst. But the intruder didn't find me. Instead, they moved on, unaware of the tiny sliver of space that was my sanctuary. I don't know if it was luck or something else, but they left the room, continuing their search for valuables, or victims. It felt like hours before the police arrived, but when they did, they apprehended the intruder without incident. It turned out he was the criminal from the news, wanted in several states for a spree of home invasions and violent assaults. Knowing how close I came to being another one of his victims shook me to my core. The aftermath was a blur of police statements, heightened security measures, and restless nights. I realized that no amount of horror movies or true crime stories could have prepared me for the reality of facing a real-life monster. Thank you for watching. If you found these stories gripping, don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling content. For another hair-raising tale, check out our suggested video. And if you're hungry for more eerie encounters, dive into our playlist featuring similar chilling narratives.